I would like to welcome Arlyn Culwick to my channel. He's the co-founder of Blocknet, who is sponsoring this video. Blocknet is a decentralized application platform that allows for a true peer-to-peer protocol between nodes on different blockchains, essentially making the Blocknet the internet of blockchains. Welcome, Arlyn, and thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I would like to start by asking what inspired you to create this project?
Well, the Blocknet emerged from a vision of a decentralized internet, free from the current levels of vulnerability to hacks and fraud and manipulation by the powerful. And we realized that potentially the key piece of this would be blockchain interoperability. So we set out to build it.
So I know that development started in 2014, which I found to be pretty surprising because that means that 4 years ago you had already recognized a need for this platform or for this use case. So how did you envision that so early on?
Well, for me personally, it came about when we saw many coins just adding feature after feature to essentially their wallets at the time. And that compounded the speed at which their blockchains bloat. And it, in my view, wasn't a good separation of concerns, but specifically those of infrastructure from consumer applications. And the obvious solution to me would basically make the tech on one blockchain be usable by people on another chain.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I just definitely think that you were a little bit ahead of the game as far as time frame goes to see that there was going to be an issue with interoperability like that. So that's pretty cool. Can you explain a little bit of how the Blocknet and the X bridge are interrelated?
Yeah, it's mostly terminological, but there are some differences. Xbridge currently is both our blockchain router and our interchain peer-to-peer network. The Blocknet, in contrast, is both of these, but also XChat, which is our peer-to-peer data transport. And then, in addition, everything that runs on these three core services. So if you, I compare it to the internet. The internet isn't just DNS or just IP. It's, Facebook and Google and million websites. That would be my distinction.
Okay, so it's just another component essentially that makes up a greater whole?
Yeah.
Okay. So could you explain why the block token is needed for the network?
Yeah, it's needed for several things. The first and most obvious one is the Blocknet's blockchain. Staking nodes are rewarded in Blocknet tokens when they stake a new block in the blockchain. So Blocknet tokens serve to secure the Blocknet's blockchain. Our service nodes, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly, they're also rewarded a portion of staking rewards. Then, I guess most significantly now, the decentralized exchange has an order book. And we make it expensive for people to spam the order book or to DOS their counterparties. And the way we do that is that the network charges trade fees in Blocknet tokens.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense. It's good to know that there's use cases for it. So on the roadmap, it indicates that the UI beta launch is scheduled for March 1st. Are you guys on target for that date? What kind of users do you think are going to be included in the beta testing?
Yeah, we're on target. We released a new wallet version today, and so far we're on track. I think, like most betas, we're targeting early adopters. But in contrast to all the previous versions of the decentralized exchange, for the first time, we're going to be featuring our brand new UI. So I'm guessing we're going to have users that need not be too technically minded, and a lot of people just need to try something that actually looks like an exchange while still being decentralized.
I saw the UI release of it, obviously, that was out not too long ago. And it definitely looks very user-friendly, which I think is going to be helpful because I know as of right now, trading is done by doing some sort of command in the wallet, correct?
Yeah, there is a UI in the wallet, but it's a kind of a minimal UI. We didn't set out to use it for anything mature. It just meant that you didn't need to use a command line or console to trade. But yeah, it's definitely not part of the final product.
So I noticed that some of the Blocknet core team members have started to move to their new office space in Austin, Texas. I assume the team must be really excited about that, but what was the catalyst for that move?
I think simply that there are obvious advantages in being in the same physical place and communicating in person,
Yeah, absolutely.
working in that cohesive way that you get when you're, you know, not only in the same time zone but in each other's company.
Do you think that the centralization of the team is going to make them more efficient, that it's a bigger step for the project?
I think it will. I think it's important though that like people don't mistake the core team for some type of central controlling entity. Um, they'll absolutely work better together, but there are many and some key people that won't be in Austin, and we have many developers and other people from all over the place that will continue to contribute in the same way as they have. Um, I guess for me, you know, the core team is in exactly the same position as Bitcoin Core, fortunately, without such a horribly politicized environment. Um, but it's some people who write some code, and if people want to use the code, great. But there's no real control over anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just a matter of having everybody together. And like you said, having less physical barriers is definitely going to make for an easier work experience. So I'm interested to see how
Yeah,
that pans out. So I
me too.
know that there was a possible partnership mentioned between Blocknet and Bitfinex in helping them create ETHFinex. I haven't really heard much about that lately. So has there been any progress or any updates?
Yeah, there is. Our partnership is ongoing. Basically, ETHFinex uses 0x, and currently we're working on the protocols for the Blocknet's 0x integration. And once those are built and tested and operational, then we'll move on to integrating to the rest of ETHFinex's components. Um, then when it comes to helping create ETHFinex, they're actively considering adopting several technologies, and we're one of them. So if our technology does what they want it to, then they'll end up being powered by the Blocknet.
Very cool. Are you worried that Bitfinex might have a tainted image with the issue with like Tether and everything else going on, and that might cause problems for future cooperation?
Not at all. I basically see the Blocknet as, well, in the context of centralized exchanges, I see the Blocknet as a way to decentralize. So they, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to list the benefits because there are many of them, but basically they can adopt a technology with no counterparty risk, with no risk of coins being stolen or the exchange being hacked because there's just no one thing to hack. And in the process, what they can do is they can continue to monetize their real asset, which is their liquidity. Their order book is what sets them apart, and that's their main asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if instead of monetizing it by requiring user logins and running a whole bunch of hopefully secure servers, they can do it by writing essentially a decentralized API that runs over the Blocknet. Then their order book can be made available to all users of the Blocknet, and anyone who accesses that liquidity pool needs to pay in one way or another, and there are various models for that. And the exchange gets to shed a whole lot of risk. And I guess, you know, in the context of this whole tether thing going on, they wouldn't need to prove that they have a certain number of coins or anything because it's decentralized. The problem just goes away completely.
No, you make a
So
good point.
yeah, I have zero concerns about this at all. I think if I were a centralized exchange, I'd be either developing my own decentralized exchange tech or testing everything out there to see what works the best.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern that I've seen get brought up just overall for Bitfinex. But like you mentioned, really their commodity is their liquidity. They're a very big, very busy exchange. So you make a good point. So the overhaul of your website and your branding has been done by VSA partners. They've worked with companies like McDonald's, Facebook, and IBM, which is pretty impressive. So how did you guys get such a prominent design team on board?
Actually, they approached us.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, a few of their people, especially Nick Cabot, had been looking for some promising blockchain projects. And as far as I know, we were the first project they picked to work with. And it was really lucky timing. At the time, we were looking for some people to do a really great front end, and so it came together beautifully.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to see what comes of it because I'd imagine it's going to be pretty impressive coming out of them. So
I cannot wait. I mean, there's screenshots out there, but you'll have a working thing pretty soon.
Very cool. Very
in
cool.
a few days.
Yeah, right. That's what the roadmap says.
Yeah.
So it seems that Blocknet and Komodo have similar goals. Do you consider them to be a direct competitor in the space? And if not, what do you think sets you guys apart?
Well, okay, I don't consider Komodo a competitor in the interchain services space.
Okay.
But in the decentralized exchange space, yes, they are a competitor, but only if they choose to think like one. The reason I think that is that we just prefer not to. And that's because the reality is that all decentralized exchanges will be intimately connected by bots one way or another. And not just by bots, that'll happen in the immediate term, but by all kinds of interchain services that just need a liquidity pool. So for me, there's just no escaping interoperability. And in this light, I think it seems to me that the optimal approach would be to collaborate, because we have a common goal, and that's to revolutionize exchange technology as we know it. So it just makes sense to work together.
No, it does. I just don't necessarily think that everybody has that thought process, but that is, not seeing them as a competitor and hopefully maybe seeing them as somebody that you can work with is definitely a better and more productive outlook to have. But again, I don't think it's a common thing to find in crypto, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, we're not dependent on their working with us. But it would be nice because our entire ethos is about building an internet of blockchains, and there's just no incentive to have a competitor mindset when you're thinking like that. I mean, pretty much every week there's at least one project that pops up on the community's radar, and one of the first questions is, are they a competitor? And so far in every single case, it's either been that they're trying to do the exact same thing as us, especially with decentralized exchanges in the last 9-10 months. Or it's just a thing where we go, oh, wow, if we integrate with them, then we could do all these cool things. So then I just reach out and have conversations, and if it works, it works. Yeah, it's kind of simple for me. We want to make a decentralized internet, so we're just going to keep working with people.
Yeah, no, and again, it's a good point. It's important to make better relationships with people instead of just trying to put everybody in a competitor category. So, is Bitcoin Layer 2 compatibility and the reduction of on-chain fees for the user experience a part of Blocknet's vision?
Yeah, I shouldn't give too simplistic an answer to this one. Put it this way. It's definitely part of our vision, but it's not something that we've put on a roadmap or announced, because we won't do that until we feel we have an actual solution that we can commit to and we know. So Dan is really excited about this whole thing. It's kind of like the Lightning Network. It would make a lot of sense to use our current technology as a settlement layer, and then to use this layer 2 stuff for the trading, and to separate the two. but it's very early days in the journey to a workable interchain Lightning solution. I mean, Lightning networks, I've heard a lot of people thinking it's going to be amazing for decentralized exchange, but there's a real difficult problem that people haven't solved. And as far as I can see, they haven't really noticed it yet most of the time, which is if you're a trader, right? You're running nodes on all the chains that could plug into the Lightning network, because if you can't do that, you can't keep track of the underlying coins. And that means that there could be cascades of settlement acts that surprise you, and suddenly there's no liquidity. You really do need to be able to keep track of of all the IOUs.
Okay.
And if you miss out on that, you're going to be trouble. That would mean that as a trader, you would need not only to run all the networks that are currently plugged into the Lightning network, or all the coins, sorry, that are plugged in. You would need to run all the coins that could potentially plug in while you are trading. So it's scary, and it's a massive amount of blockchains you're going to keep going. I don't see that working. Yeah, so we would have to find a solution that makes it easy for traders. So otherwise, no one will ever use it.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like we have no ideas. We do have some ideas, but until we have a solution we can publish and put out there and commit to building, I don't know if it makes sense to put it on a roadmap. But yeah, absolutely, the tech solves a whole lot of other problems. So if we can do it, we will.
Yeah, well, you answered my next question, which is, what's the time frame on the implementation? And again, another good point. What's the point of setting a time frame on something if you are still in the process of really figuring out the inner workings of it?
Yeah, exactly. We really don't like to hype stuff. I mean, we could say we're going Lightning network, and everyone might get excited, but like it kind of would be like bad faith in a way.
Yeah.
Because if we don't personally know how are we going to do it, I mean, I don't know. It's weird.
No, but I mean, that's a good way to be, deal with the tech. And then once you've got that all figured out, you can deal with the marketing and the information and the releasing and contacting people. So it's good to put the more important things first, which is the tech, really. So
yeah, absolutely.
What sort of decentralized applications for the Blocknet do you see for use beyond the decentralized exchange itself?
Everything. Stupid answer, but I'm kind of not exaggerating. Maybe I can break it into categories.
Okay.
So currently, most of the internet is built on a thing called the API ecosystem. So if you're a developer, you're making an app or a website, you can save yourself an enormous amount of effort by plugging into an API somewhere to get you e-commerce, or maybe a third-party payment gateway, or some kind of identity management system, or millions of things. The issue with that, though, is it's expensive to monetize anything on the traditional API ecosystem. You need to use a third-party payment gateway, payment processor, credit card networks, probably several of those, and they're high feasible and probably worse, quite a lot of user friction. People need to enter their credit card details or sign up to not only your app but a whole other thing as well.
Yeah.
Too many clicks doesn't really work out so well. So that means most APIs are free, and that of course means that most APIs are not that well maintained. In contrast, we can frictionlessly monetize digital services, and that's truly exciting to me. So basically, anybody who wants to build a service that runs on the internet and monetize it with pretty much zero friction can go for it. So that's my first very general category. Second category is anyone who's figured out how cool blockchain-based business models are will just go for this because it's amazing. Third category, I'm guessing any application that benefits from decentralization can go this route. So if you just have a better proposition by, for example, customers not having to trust that you're going to play nice. So 90% of all the slightly dodgy looking websites out there who don't have a big brand just don't require people to trust you. Easy. It's not necessarily easy. It takes careful design and everything, but we enabled the possibility of that in general for anyone who wants to build on us. So I think it is a very general purpose thing that we're building.
I also think it's important to remember that, which is kind of why I asked that question, because when I first heard about Block, the go-to point is always it's a decentralized exchange, interoperability, so on and so forth, which is definitely a huge part of it, but understanding that there's certainly other use cases for it, and there's certainly other aspects for it that can be utilized, giving it other areas that it can flourish in, which is important.
Exactly. I think the simplest way I would describe what we're doing is we got 3 core services. If, in my opinion, if you build those, then you pretty much get decentralized, generic into blockchain infrastructure. So that's a blockchain router. It's a peer-to-peer data transport, and it is decentralized exchange. There's a difference between decentralized exchange as a core service and a decentralized exchange application, which is aimed at traders specifically, people in crypto who want to trade in a familiar manner and have it work. So all we've been doing for the last while is taking the one service, which actually does use some of the other stuff, all of the other stuff actually, and we just have made it nice to use and well packaged for people. And finally, we're approaching a release that actually puts all those things out into the world.
It's pretty exciting.
Super exciting.
You guys must be very pumped over there.
Pumped and tired.
Yes. Yes. It is late where you are now too, so I get that.
Yeah. We habitually are reluctant to make deadlines for ourselves. But I think that's starting to change. I guess we're done with a whole lot of rather exploratory work. We need to try some new thing and test it, and if it works, great. Probably won't work the first time, and you just keep on testing and trying and exploring. We're sort of done with that, and now that we, at least for the purposes of decentralized exchange, and now that we've got the core stuff nailed down, it's a bit more predictable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can have actual deadlines, and ideally we will stick to all of them. It is software. Deadlines in software are woolly things in practice. But
at least you're trying, right? You've got a goal and you're trying. So that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were or are the biggest challenges associated with you guys creating the DEX or working with the DEX?
Biggest challenges? I would guess the biggest ones are actually social or personal rather than straight up technical.
Okay.
I guess for me, it was very difficult to kind of be brave enough to commit to something long term. Firstly, because the crypto market just doesn't have a long horizon at all. We started in late 2014, and a long-term project means a bunch of lean years where you believe in something and you're going to just plug away at that because you think it's amazing. But in our case, it was literally February or March 2017, so kind of a year ago, that people were stopped saying this project has no use case. I'm not exaggerating. People didn't get what it was for. They thought it was just this pie in the sky stuff that may potentially be something someday. So it was difficult. I think doing something that where you know most of the people who are supporting you wouldn't really get, like, or wouldn't understand the scale of it. It was a tricky one. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are obvious technical difficulties. I think it took us the design phase for the Blocknet was, as I said, explorative. A lot of the work needed to be done in real life, not just in our heads or something, to work out how things work. And it's hard. It's hard figuring this stuff out. And I think taking the time to really nail down a solution that we are confident is the right approach to building something like inter-blockchain infrastructure was the main technical difficulty, I think.
As far as social goes, that makes sense. I could imagine that working on something that you're passionate about, that you've put your heart and soul into, and for years everybody's like, well, I don't get it. What is it? It's probably not going to work. That probably would have been quite tiring after an extended period of time.
Yeah, it was. I think, I was the one who primarily liaised with the community. And I guess crypto in 2014 and 2015, it was a very different place to what it is now. It was much more Wild West. It was a lot more hardcore in terms of general awareness of the ethos of Bitcoin at the time. Pretty much Bitcoin. There's a lot of Bitcoin maximalists going on. And for one reason or another, we ended up with what I would think of as a very toxic culture in the early days. Bitcoin talk back then was unbearable. It was so toxic. And it was basically about 2 years of work. Essentially, me just scrambling about trying to figure out how to change the culture. And of course, every attempt that I actually made would fail, because as soon as it's recognizably me doing something, the first thing everyone would do would just be like, oh, well, sure, but this is crypto. I can do exactly what I want. And if you're doing this, then I'll do, something in reaction to that. And it's never really going to take off. And I guess, I don't know how deep we want to get into this whole thing, but for me, it was fundamentally about a thing called a second personal virtue. Virtue's a little hobby of mine. I really like virtue theory. A virtue normally for most people is something like bravery. It's an aspect of your character. That's not a second personal virtue, though. The second personal virtue is instantiated between you and me here and now in the way that we're relating to each other. It's not an aspect of my subjectivity or my character. It's not an aspect of yours. It's between us now. I guess what I did is I just used this type of language for 2 years until enough people in the community kind of got into the game that I was playing, which is about thinking through consciously how the other person might experience you in the way that you're being to someone, and then putting into practice these habits of not just talking about what you're talking about, but consciously talking about how you're relating to the other person, if you can. And that led to this kind of this sea change. Everything became a little bit sort of positive and a bit more constructive. And as soon as it clicked, everything just snowballed into this really great community where people are positive to each other and welcoming and actually like are very eager to get involved and volunteer and get stuff done. And it's wonderful. It's night and day compared to how it was when we started.
Yeah, when I first got into it about a year and a half ago now, I definitely saw glimpses of what you're talking about. Everybody, even if you were pro any project or you had anything positive or constructive to say, it was your shilling, or you don't know what you're talking about, or you're trying to promote this project, who's paying you what, and you were never allowed to just be supportive or curious about something for the sole purpose of just being supportive of something, right, without an incentive. But I have definitely seen an improvement and a change in the community as a whole in the last year and a half, and obviously I have not been around as long as you have. So I can only imagine what it was like when you started. So thank you
You
for
can
your
read it all.
yeah, and Bitcoin Talk.
Go into Bitcoin Talk. You can see everything.
I don't know if I want
horrible.
to, but that's good
No,
to
no,
know.
it's really not a nice experience,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's educational.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So my next question is, what is the legal status or legal issues with launching an exchange with no KYC requirements or know your customer requirements?
Okay, this I kind of like.
Okay.
Um, One of the most enjoyable topics for me at the moment, because we've been looking very deliberately into it, quite systematically, and consulting professionals in the area. Um, with the Blocknet in particular, um, it's really, really, really nice. We are in essentially exactly the same position as Bitcoin. There is simply no company or person with any special legal status or control over our purely peer-to-peer technology.
Mm-hmm.
There are no user accounts. We have no customers because we are not a business. We're not a company. Um, Everybody who uses the Blocknet acts as a self-sovereign entity of their own volition and purely under whatever legal framework their country or region imposes. It's kind of beautiful.
That is very interesting, and also saves a lot of grief in trying to have to figure all that stuff out. So that's kind of a plus
It
side of
really
it.
does.
Yeah.
Just so the people watching know, this is not the same situation for every decentralized exchange out there. A lot of them have set up actual companies in some jurisdiction. Um, Quite a lot of them need to run servers for their order books or something, and those clearly exist in a particular place within a particular legal framework. And I don't know what those projects are going to get into, but it's definitely not the same as Bitcoin. It's going to be quite a lot more like a normal company.
It's going to be interesting to see how all that unfolds in the next, I don't know, probably a year or two
So
now that things are starting to really get moving.
it's going to be fascinating.
Yes, it is.
I hope people like stay ahead of the curve, because we wouldn't want otherwise good technology getting shut down or requiring intense KYC
Mm-hmm.
measures that pretty much destroy the one of the main reasons behind this stuff, which is
Yeah.
we don't we don't want to make it so that you have to trust somebody. And if someone's storing your personal information and having to keep it safe, that's really not something that you want in a decentralized exchange.
No, it definitely just defeats the entire purpose.
Yeah.
So, who do you see using the Blocknet decentralized exchange?
Um, in the short term, I see crypto traders
Mm.
and bots. I really can't underscore the bot thing enough. Bots, some people hate them, but the fact is that they are the lifeblood of an order book in every exchange. You just don't get liquidity without encouraging bots. So
Mm-hmm.
we have spent a very, very large slice of our time in the last several months writing APIs. We have an API that you can plug into, run your bots, trade on a purely decentralized exchange, and go for it. I'm so excited about that. It's going to change everything. It'll change the user experience for human beings from one where there's not that much going on in the exchange to there's a whole lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on in the exchange. Then for the longer term, I think that by far the largest segment of our user base is going to be smart contracts, interchain services, doing business in an automated fashion from blockchain to blockchain and needing to monetize those services over the decentralized exchange.
It's very cool. I the point you're making with needing liquidity is, I mean, it's imperative, obviously, because we've seen exchanges that have not done so well because of the fact there's no liquidity or other issues. So I actually didn't realize that bots played that big of a role. So it's good to know.
Yeah, it's necessary. I mean, for example, let's say you're a scalper. Um, if you're a human being, you really have to have incredible reflexes, and you will always lose to a machine. Scalpers will essentially place normally a lot of small buys and sells across the spread between the bids and the asks.
Mm-hmm.
Now that always diminishes the size of the spread. And so if you've got a lot of scalpers going on, you have a really tight spread. And so if you need to sell and then buy, you just don't lose much money. It's one of the most important things about an exchange.
Yeah.
But scalping, you need to really move fast, and machines can move extremely quickly. So also most machines are not particularly clever at making decisions. So sometimes humans can beat them, but with that sort of way of capturing value, I'm going to guess bots are going to run that entire thing.
Again, it's going to be interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. But that's cool that you spent that much time making it so that there will be an entry point for bots, so that there is liquidity on the DEX.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of liquidity soon, I think.
That's very cool. So my final question for you, and of course after we're done, you can always add final comments if you want as well. What do you think sets Blocknet apart? What's its biggest defining factor?
Sure, good question. As a decentralized exchange or as interchain infrastructure?
Well, we've touched on the exchange a bit, so talk about the infrastructure aspect.
All right. Well, part of that's a really easy answer, which is that there's just no tech in existence that actually exists now, apart from ours, that does inter-blockchain interoperability. I do need to qualify that in a few ways. There are some projects that do exist that are doing something between one blockchain and another. There are quite a few doing various things. For example, there are side chains. There are people building features on one chain that allows at least some interaction with another, like what was that one thing? Something relay, BTC relay, basically helps you interact with Bitcoin from Ethereum.
Sure.
There are a few things out there, but none of them look like they're even candidates for generic inter-blockchain services. They do a specific thing. They're a specific tool for a limited subset of use cases. Now, I really don't mean that in any ways to denigrate what they're doing. I think they're like, almost all of them are really cool ideas, and they'll definitely have a place and a use. To me, it's the difference between a cool kind of LAN versus the internet. Right? Like, we do need something general purpose, and while it's still early days, and there's absolutely no guarantee that our specific design is going to be the one that functions as some kind of decentralized internet. We want it to be. We've specifically designed it for that.
Yeah.
And it exists. So
that's a
I
plus.
don't see anything else. Yeah, there's nothing else in that same category.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Well, that's good to know. So is there anything else you'd like to add? Any comments?
Nothing off the top of my head. I guess stick around for the ride. We've got a whole bunch of cool stuff coming out. 1st of March is our decentralized exchange beta. 15th of March is the white paper, which people have been asking for over a year and a half. I've hammered it into some shape, and I'm going to start collaborating with the rest of the team pretty intensively over the next couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy it. It's very long at the moment, but hopefully we'll explain all of this very clearly. Very cool. That's my main hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you guys the best of luck in the next year. I can't wait to see what the exchange looks like and how everything kind of rolls out.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time and for the interview.